So I'm not going to beat around the bush and pretend that it was about a virus. It was never about a virus. It's been always about this election and trying to manipulate people to try to sway the outcome of this election.
All right, let's talk about COVID, because I think here's the thing I want to say about COVID. The reason COVID is so difficult to talk about is because you only have today. You can't go back, you can't rewind things and implement different strategies and different tactics and have a different set of data in this reality to compare and contrast between one another. You can't do it, right? You only have the data of today. We only know what happened based upon what we did. We don't have two different data pools, if, shoulda, woulda, coulda. So it's easy for a administration that's trying to come in rather than the administration that had to actually deal with it and actually implement things. It's much easier for the administration trying to take over that didn't have to fight this COVID battle and to throw accusations at people, right? It's so easy to do that because you didn't have to do anything. You were just able to sit on the outside and watch this happen. But there are some things we can consider. Number one, I remember back in February or March, 2 million people are going to be dead because of Trump. 2 million. You just wait. By the end of the year, 2 million are going to be dead. There's 200,000. Right? There's 200,000. And so now the argument's not 2 million are going to be dead. It's one is too many. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I get that. It sucks. Nobody likes people to die. But people die in pandemics. Like, that's the reality of it. Like, people die in pandemics. Nobody's up for death. But to pretend like it was going to be 2 million and it's 200,000 and that's not a win is crazy. Right? It's crazy that we're able to be persuaded like that so quickly. Like, we don't go, but wait a second, you said 2 million and only 200,000 were going to die. How's that not a good thing? Like, that would be just too logical to ask, right? And I'm just like, what? Like, that's just amazing to me that people can't see that. And we just don't go, hold up, that's 1.8 million less people dead. That seems like a good job. It's not hard math, right?
It's so hard to even talk about this without just descending into the lunacy and laughing just to not start, overflowing in cuss words. Because, I mean, if we both think that the pandemic is BS.
Viewership,
but not in the same way that our president thinks that it's a hoax. It's not that there's not a real virus.
No one said it was a hoax, but the Washington Post, though. By the way, it never came out of his mouth. It's a hoax because that's a media talking point.
Right. Well, but that's what I'm getting at is like those who are in opposition are eager to spin it in this direction. That's what you're saying.
It's the most deadly thing.
It's not about using your brain or looking at the evidence or the science. They love to say these things.
Dustin, you're a science denier.
To ridicule you and to use social peer pressure and all these things, but it's the most anti-science, absurd thing. It's an exercise in anti-science. The whole thing is absurd.
But dude, somebody is hitting in the comment section right now. I can't believe you'd be laughing. 200,000 people are dead. And that's not what we're laughing at.
Yeah, that's not
what we're laughing at.
It's not a pandemic. Do you call the annual flu a pandemic? Because, even if you take the surface level narrative and statistics like the 200,000 deaths, which, if you at all have a functioning brain and have been paying attention, those statistics, there's reason to question them at minimum. okay? And we won't even get into what they might actually be because that's the
But
difficulty.
you need tell them why. I mean, maybe they don't have a functioning brain, or maybe they do have a functioning brain.
I mean,
but they hadn't heard. I mean, they
yeah,
haven't even
sure. Because
right?
if you just listen to fake news, then I'm sure they don't. Talk
then you
about
don't have
these
a clue.
things. So CDC revised their numbers probably a good month ago now and said that only 6% of the COVID deaths, and this is official numbers, only 6% of them died from COVID alone. So that means there were the comorbidities and other diseases or other things, ailments, along with the COVID that they might have died from. The other 94%.
That would be 12,000.
Yeah, so the 6% is quite a low number compared to 200,000. But even if, we can acknowledge that, okay, COVID comes along and it complicates things and you might die from something else that you wouldn't have in the moment if you hadn't got COVID. Okay, but we also realize that some of these reported COVID deaths really didn't have anything to do with their COVID. They had been already cured from it, or just simply, if you look at how they report the numbers, if you die from anything having reported positive for COVID, as long as it wasn't something like a car crash, and even that is questionable, then they report it as a COVID death for the overall statistics. And you can get into other ways of looking at these statistics.
Explain one more thing. Explain the hospital, how they're supplemented.
Well, yeah, along the way.
I mean, that's a big deal.
Sure,
that's a huge
along
deal
the way,
that people probably don't know
hospitals
about.
and doctors have been perhaps encouraged to label cases and pump up their positive numbers because they get federal assistance, and that number might vary from place to place. But and you got even more if somebody went on a ventilator. Because we supposedly were going to be super short on ventilators. But, so there was incentive out there for doctors and hospitals to pad their numbers because they would get federal support. And in a time when otherwise they don't have any patients coming in because we've locked them down, another thing to criticize there, all the people having to forsake their much needed treatments. Even if they weren't or even if they were elective, they might have been very necessary for. How many people died from that kind of thing?
A lot. There's been a whole group of doctors that have come out in the United States talking about we have to get rid of these lockdowns because people need other treatments that they're not able to get because COVID. So we have to end this lunacy. It's got to stop.
So in saying it's a hoax, it's the assumption and the premise that this is a global pandemic. Not that there's a virus out here that we need to react to and seek cures to, have policies to restrict certain movements to slow the spread. I mean, we
protect certain
demographics
and certain groups, like certain
but
age
that it's
groups.
A global pandemic that's gonna. That was about fear and control, and it's ultimately about an election. So I'm not going to beat around the bush and pretend that it was about a virus. It was never about a virus. It's been always about this election and trying to manipulate people to try to sway the outcome of this election.
Yep.
And so if now the talking points are that the Trump administration has done such a horrible job in responding to this virus that all these people have died and the economy has suffered, that is bullcrap. And so we can walk through a bit of the timeline and look at some of the Trump administration's policies and how they've responded and how the other side has recommended.
I mean, Mike Pence. I think Mike Pence. If you go back and now, you'll never see this talking point on CNN or MSNBC or Washington Post or New York Times. So you better go watch it for yourself. Go watch the debate. But when it got to this, Mike Pence gave the best answer on COVID. He said, for one, we responded quickly. Decisively. We cut off travel from China. And by the way, Joe Biden called us xenophobic for it. He was against us cutting off travel bans, and he called us xenophobic. Why? Because that's what you do in identity politics. You call them racist, sexist, xenophobic, everything you can, right? Because at the time, no one thought it was serious at the time, right? No one did.
Well,
and so, not no one, but you know what I'm saying. Like
I would say these people did this so that the Trump administration would fail to act, and it would be worse, and then they would come back around and really say, "Look how horrible a job you did." But they were wrong in the beginning, or at least they gave the wrong answers publicly. I think some of these people knew what was coming,
or at least Joe Biden did. I mean, Joe Biden said, "Don't do it." I mean, let's just that's reality.
Yeah, no, the World Health Organization, lots of people said that was an overreaction, if they were even responding at all, because most of them were just not even talking about COVID. They were busy impeaching Trump. They were busy. Nancy Pelosi's busy tearing up his, State of the Union address or whatever, putting on a show, Russia collusion. They're not concerned about the things perhaps we ought to be.
And so you have this decisive reaction to it, and this shutting down the greatest. Like, it blows my mind that the talking point that Trump is just concerned with his stock market and his big time corporate buddies still holds when the man shut down the greatest economy in the world. In an election year, he shut it down. And I'm like, how does that talking point still work? Like, how do people let Democrats still use it? It's like they could have used it 3 years maybe, and you might have been without a brain and believed it. But now, how does that still work? They used it in the debate. How do you listen to that and go, yeah, he does have all that? He shut it down.
Look at the difficult decision there.
Yes.
To shut down, to do something unprecedented and shut down the most.
Your whole election depends upon the economy, and you're shutting it down.
And he's so selfish, apparently, but then he makes the difficult choice of shutting it down in the interest of safety and security, knowing that what the repercussions would be to the economy. Attempting, though, to act very decisively in those moments. If you'll remember, we started having those daily press briefings, and Trump and the administration and the task force were having meetings with leaders of different industries, both healthcare, logistics, transportation, the food producers, and the president and his team were making sure that the grocery stores would stay open, other important supply chains that in the panic and in the shutdown, these important things would stay open, that food would keep getting to the grocery stores, that we would tap into the farmers and the people who are food producers to make sure, the food was still flowing, that hospitals and places would stay open, that the trucks would keep running, and all these things.
And Pence brought up something important to all that when they said, when Harris said, obviously it's not working. Well, no, 2 million to 200,000, 1.8 million shortage there. Obviously it did work. And then Pence brought up this. What an insult to the American people. Yeah. What an insult to the American people that put their life on the line, on the front line. Because in the earlier stages, we didn't know. I wore a mask the first month or two of this because I didn't know. The science wasn't out. We don't fully know what this is, this China virus.
I knew.
Right?
I knew it was fake the whole time. Well, I mean, not to say I absolutely or knew exactly how it'd play out, but I knew this was bogus. Because when you know the fake news and you know what they're up to and you've been watching it for 3 years, it's easy to see. And you know how desperate they are because these people are crooks and they're going to jail soon. And so they are this desperate. And you're going to find out. People are going to find out. If they're not mad now because they couldn't visit their dying family member in the hospital, because their wedding had to get canceled, because high school athletes missed out on a scholarship that they worked their whole life for, because families didn't get to go to a funeral. I mean, people ought to be pissed, and you're going to be more pissed when you find out what's really been going on. But if you blame this administration and this president for it, then you're just a fool. Because on top of what we've already said, they mobilized our industries that have been shut down by the policies of the last several decades and refit them and retooled their capacity to make ventilators. Now we're the world's leading producer of ventilators. They're going after them for everything they could, and Trump flipped it on them, and we became a leader in that thing, in that very thing, in testing. And you hear these talking points from Trump all the time, and the reason he repeats them all the time is for the reason you just mentioned, though, because the people, Trump and his administration are making the providing the leadership, but then it is Americans who are carrying this out every day.
Yes.
And like you said, on the front lines, in the hospitals, to the
Yes.
grocery store workers who, if it's this serious threat, then they're putting their lives at risk. But people as well in their businesses and everything else are responding and acting, and that is decisive leadership and action.
Essential workers, right?
This is a military-style response, and this is the type of response that we ought to have in this kind of scenario, as well as natural disasters and others. And if we weren't prepared, this was my a silver lining in it all, because if we weren't prepared before for these types of things, and I'd say we weren't.
No.
We're prepared now.
Yeah,
I mean, we're much
absolutely.
more prepared if something happens than we ever were. We used our military not to fight foreign wars and then they die over somebody else's battle, but to help our people
domestically. And something else we ought to see from this too is the willingness of Democrats to deem what is essential and unessential. Like you need to catch that. Like the ability of government to decide that your job, that you make a living, that you feed your family with, is unessential. Therefore, you have to stay at home. You have to lose your business. I don't know about you, but my job's essential. It's essential to my family, right? It might not be essential to COVID, but it's essential to my family. And they use that. They destroy businesses over political gain. And they didn't think 2 seconds about throwing your business under the table for their political gain. They don't
States
care
are still locked
about
down.
you.
There are, I mean, we're in Georgia, and we've not had it nowhere near as bad as some of these other states.
Yeah, and one thing before we move on, because we have to move off the COVID. I know this, but one more thing that I thought was, and I wish you've said this, I wish the Trump administration would pound this, because we actually do, and Mike Pence brought this up, we actually do know what it looks like for us to respond in a failed way to a pandemic, a real pandemic, right? We know what that looks like, and I'm pretty sure 2009, the swine flu, wasn't it 2009? The swine flu.
It's every 2 years.
Swine flu breaks out, right? 60 million people contract the swine flu versus 7.5 million with COVID. So if you take the same death ratio there, I mean, you're looking at 2 million people dead at that point, right? So it's like, for me, it's like, yeah, they just got lucky. They got lucky that it wasn't as lethal as COVID, which COVID's not lethal. I don't know.
They didn't get lucky. This is fake. It's fake. It's a fake pandemic.
I get it. I'm sorry. My point is they still got lucky in the fact that the swine flu was not deadly the way that it could have been, because there was 5 times more people contracted it. All I'm saying is you need to tear down every talking point the Democrats try to throw at you, because there are no talking points. If you know history and you read
statistics, the survival rate is greater than the annual flu. Like, you're more likely to die from diabetes and heart failure, probably get struck by lightning, than you are to die of COVID. I'm serious.
I know you are.
I bet that's probably even true.
For the sake of your blood pressure, we're going to move on.
I love it. I love it. And you need to be this upset or worked up about it. Because, again, it's not that there's not a real virus, because there really is a virus that, again, we'll find out, a virus engineered in a lab to be a biological weapon. But if the premise of a lockdown was 15 days to slow the spread, because you can't stop a virus from running its course.
Amen. I have a fogging company, so I know this to be true.
And it was only to let the hospitals try to prepare, not get overwhelmed, and try to prepare. And because the assumption was you can't stop it, it's got to run its course. We've got to get it and go through it, and people who need the priority care have got to have that, and that kind of thing is not this total lockdown. If you want to be protected from a virus that is so microscopic that you're going to need like a hazmat suit on to be protected.
Yeah,
and
your
you're
little
going to tie a
mask isn't
t-shirt
gonna work
around your face and think you're protected. You are not the victim of a virus. You are a victim of a hoax, a fake news pandemic that is meant to manipulate and control and create fear
Yep.
in a population and to destroy economy, because that was Trump's greatest weapon.
Yep.
Segue.
Mm-hmm.
So don't buy it.
And I made
Don't buy it.
I actually tried to talk about those points with a Delta employee about 2 weeks ago, and I almost got kicked off the plane because I had
not a conversation to have on there.
because I had this mask and I had pulled it down to get a drink of water, and she thought I was just keeping it down below my mouth. And what bothered me though was how just her attitude towards me. I was like, wow, this is what we're producing in a society. Like, her attitude was just like awful.
Fascist.
Man, it was nuts. And I was like, ma'am, do you realize this little mask that you gave me, that the virus particles, this is pandering, it's grandstanding. The virus particles are not, I'm spitting at you. If I have COVID right now, you're getting it. This mask is not stopping this virus from going through it. It's not helping.
I love the meme that says, so all of the paranoid mask wearers, the obedient mask wearers that are concerned they're testing positive, so they go out and get the test, and it turns out they're positive. They're wearing a mask the whole time. And then all the people who don't wear the mask and they don't get sick and they don't get tested, and they're definitely not contributing to the positive cases.
Yeah.
The positive cases. And I believe there are statistics now that's like 80 to 90% of positive cases are people that wear masks almost always.
Yeah.
Like, and there's different categories of how often you wear the mask.
crazy,
and it's
man.
like the two top ones that wear the mask the most make up the majority of people who test positive for it. So the mask don't work, friends. Might make you feel better. Sure makes you look stupid.
Why?
Sorry, maybe I edit that out.